Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Shelf Life. This is Simran, and this is my podcast, Shelf Life. We talk about books, their philosophies, but most importantly, our personal relationship with a book. Today, we have a very special guest with us. We have Sabrish, and I'm going to let you do your introduction yourself. Just tell us a little bit about you and what you do and everything.
Hi guys, my name is Sabrish. I just recently graduated from engineering and just started my first job. So that's been that, and 2020 has been quite weird and like
Yeah.
a lot of ups and downs. Uh, I like reading books, a lot of trekking, and a lot of other things as well. I like to ask questions and think about like a lot of different stuff. Like there's nothing one particular thing that interests me in life, I would say.
Mm.
like I'm passionate about many things, so it kind of makes my life difficult to manage all the things at once.
Yeah.
I would say, yeah.
Do you feel
So
like
that's me.
Do you
Yeah.
feel like you're an overachiever sort of person? Do you feel like you're
No,
very
no, no, no.
passionate about a lot of things?
I'm not really an overachiever, you could say. It's just that um, so I like a lot of ho- I have a lot of hobbies, plus I'll enjoy a lot of stuff. Like I enjoy art, music, like everybody does that, right? But like I for me it's more like what more can I do with this thing, right?
Hmm.
Like I always think about in entrepreneurial ways or like different ideas that I have to, start something up. So that's kind of the perspective that I have in life.
Have you always been this way? Have you always been very passionate about a lot of things?
Yeah, right from my childhood. I think the first books that I had were mostly some books about space, uh, one encyclopedia, and then one more other book, like a few picture dictionaries and stuff like that. And I used to read those books and just like I was curious about a lot of stuff, so just used to open up those books and read whatever I could find. Then after
Hmm.
that, I started reading those Tinkle books and Champak. Those were like my introduction to reading. And
Hmm.
fortunately, I had elder siblings who were cousins actually who were into reading as well at that time.
Hmm.
And I used to talk about books with them as well. And slowly, I got into the whole, started reading novels as well.
Hmm.
So, but I mostly read fantasy books because sometimes I used to get really frustrated about
Hmm.
reality. So I was just read
Yeah.
escape into those books, right?
Yeah, that's lovely the way you segued into, your own history with reading. That was actually going to
Yeah.
be my next question. Like, how do
Oh,
you, where does this journey start for you? How
yeah,
did
yeah,
you get introduced to these things? Like, tell me, you started with space, right? Like you told me about
yeah.
space just now, and I was a huge space geek myself, and I
Okay.
had that encyclopedia as well. Like my
Yeah,
dad had gifted me this huge book of just space facts, and I used to
yeah,
read it I used to read it like it was a novel. Like I would sit for hours and read it.
yeah,
So
yeah.
was that for you as well? Like did that kind of stuff interest you, that got you into this habit of reading?
I think it was stories mostly.
Hmm.
Like my grandmother used to read me stories. Not just my grandmother. My mom. I used to like stories during bedtime, right? Everybody does it, and but I used to not go to sleep until like they tell it, and slowly I used to started reading as well on my own. Uh, like when you start listening to the stories, right? Sometimes the thing that happens is you also visualize it, right?
Hmm.
And for me that was a huge part because uh, when I was a kid, like my brother used to go to school, so I used to be alone at my house and I used to just play with myself or like
Hmm.
with my whatever toys I had. And imagination was a huge part of that journey because, and then when you also have this source of another source where you just have to read words of the page, and in your in your mind, a lot of images pop up, and you just journeying with other people, going through their story, what's written on the
Hmm.
page, and like following those characters, and learning, changing something in yourself as well at the same time.
Yeah, that's
So
absolutely lovely, and I love what you said about visual reading. Like you read something and you kind of imagine it in your head, and you make that picture in your head. And I feel like nowadays what's happening with kids is they're so already in tune with TV and phones, and they watch so much stuff, um, and that kind of you don't get that inclination to just pick up something and imagine something. You kind of
yeah,
are. It's so easy to just watch something on YouTube or watch something on the television. This thing, so you don't have that inclination to imagine something. So do you feel like
yeah,
that sort of uh, reading those books and having those stories told to you, that really instilled this love for art and love for just abstract concepts and all these things that you mentioned in the introduction?
yeah. Definitely, definitely. Uh, those stories have actually propelled me through life in a lot of ways, because those were the characters that you looked up as ideals, or even you could say sometimes role models.
Mm,
You wanted to be like them, but you were trying to get there, and that's the whole, right? That's the whole journey of life, you could say.
mm,
So yeah, I mean, absolutely, and they inspire not just me. I think they inspire everybody. To be honest, characters of
yeah.
the page of the books,
Mm,
and I think that's the beautiful part about art and stories.
mm,
Like it's um, it's like different people are reading it, and everybody has a different opinion or perspective about it.
mm.
But it's also a way to unite people as well. So
Definitely. And
yeah.
I love what you said about characters. That's really lovely the way you just articulated it perfectly, I feel.
Thank you.
Even, yeah, even for me, I think uh, it's so funny because people get really shocked when I say this, but I genuinely feel like I read a lot as a kid and I still do. And
Mm.
sometimes it feels almost strange that I connect to these fictional characters. I connect to these characters from stories, and I see them as people, and they, you almost connect with them on a human level, and you feel like this is someone who maybe lives next to you. This could be someone who you pass on the street, and they feel so close to you yet so far. And do you feel like you could connect more to these people, these fictional characters, more than probably you could connect to people around you? Does that happen?
I think for me personally, I would say that um, it's done more than that actually.
Mm,
Like connecting with these characters also like help me connect with people in real life as well.
mm,
Like so that sort of empathy, like seeped into my real life as well. And
mm,
sometimes it's a good thing for me. Sometimes it's like really terrible because I get so I get anxious a lot if I'm thinking about something.
mm.
So yeah, so over empathizing is also something which is negative for me. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I absolutely agree with what you said. I think one of the most difficult things would be when you pick up a really good book and it really, you get completely engulfed in the story. And then when it ends or something very tragic happens, you genuinely can't
Yeah.
get out of it. And yeah,
Yeah.
does that happen to you as well? Has that happened to you
I
recently?
think what happened was kind of shock and awe. So there was this
Hmm.
book I was reading called Well of Ascension, and in that, uh, throughout the whole story, it's been leading up that this character is the like the big deal or something like that. And then in the end, there was a huge twist, and that just made me go into a shock, wherein like it felt like everything that I believed was false at this point. So I am
Yeah.
not giving more context because spoilers.
Yeah, don't.
But yeah, it's a good book by a great author called Brandon Sanderson.
Hmm.
I'm just plugging him in because I'm a huge fan.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, he writes a lot of books, and those are like really amazing in very different ways. Yeah,
Is that fantasy as well?
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
he actually writes different genres of books,
Hmm.
and he's written fantasy, he's written science fiction, he's written a little bit of dystopian as well. So,
Wow. That's a lot
but all of those
changed.
books, yeah.
Yeah.
So all of those books, but like come together in like a different way. So yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
That's lovely. And I think, the same thing happened with me. I finished reading a book, I think last week. It's called A Place for Us. I did an episode on it as well. And I think even before I finished the book, I was just sobbing because this,
yeah,
very like up and down, this tragic thing had happened, and I just started crying before I finished it. And because you generally like books uh, have the ability to really suck you in. And I
yeah,
think,
yeah,
one of the things that maybe this is what contributes to the whole, feeling of um, getting so lost in the book as well. I think the fact that this is a fictional story, the fact that, this is not something that these are not people that you can actually reach out to and be like, calm down, it's okay, whatever's happening, I'm there for you. You can't actually do that. These are not human people, but you still feel
yeah,
for them just as much. So I totally agree. And,
yeah,
I think that's a great place to come into our topic for the day, which is fantasy, and especially high fantasy, right? And
yeah.
like, okay, so tell me exactly what's the difference between science fiction and fantasy and high fantasy, and what are these different categories?
Okay. So the basic premise is that fiction, all of these fantasy, science fiction, all of these come under fiction. Fiction is anything that is like imagined or it is not real in the books. And science fiction is a futuristic like a scenario in a world where we've reached to the space and we have all these new technology, and that's the world that science fiction usually talks about. When you come to high fantasy or fantasy, it's something which is not on earth, basically
Hmm.
a new world or a different world, but
Hmm.
like the characters might be human like, or there might be new animals, like different environments,
Right.
so that kind of stuff. So it's very interesting because it like fantasy and science fiction and fiction as well, those actually like make you imagine all those new things and wonderful things,
Hmm.
because the writing is very descriptive usually.
Yeah.
And so it's basically like watching a movie in your own head,
Hmm.
you know. Like
Yeah.
imagine if you're watching Marvel movie but it was in your own head. The experience is kind of like that
Yeah.
when I'm reading a fantasy book. There's all those, there's action scenes as well, there's drama as well.
Hmm.
There's fantasy is this one genre which can encapsulate all of the things of the fiction genre, because uh, anything is basically a fantasy because it's in
Yeah,
your head, right?
exactly.
So
Yeah, anything you can
that's
think of
something I
anything
think
as,
exactly.
yeah, you can go as wild as you want. It's just totally up to you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love
So
that.
I-
Hmm.
yeah. So basically, there's no limits to what you can do
Hmm.
or what you can read in that genre. But ultimately, it's about connecting with the characters, and it also feels like when you read those books, like you also uh, sometimes like many of the books have like given different perspectives which also affect you in real life, so
Hmm.
you also like accommodate those to like you, it like gives you something to hold on to and then just go through life.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's so lovely. In fact, I was just going to ask you, like, do you feel like even though we talk so much about fantasy being, another world, and these are totally, sometimes it's not even human characters, right? It could be
Yeah.
just something completely out of the ordinary. uh, do you still find how do you find that relatability factor? Like, I personally haven't read as many fantasy books, but
Okay.
and I'm very interested to know how people still connect to these characters, and how is it that where do you find that relatability factor, or is it even important to you?
Uh, no, it's the relatability factor comes in from the very fact that we are reading about someone who's a human, or even say someone who's intelligent being who can
Hmm.
like talk, think, or feel like us.
Yeah.
So we are also thinking, feeling, and being and experiencing things. So fantasy is just a new way to experience someone else's life. But
Hmm.
it's also, you're also like, uh, when that's why you feel for them. That's why you feel for the character, right? When
Hmm.
you, because you're looking through their eyes in a way, and that also like gives a whole new perspective on like how you think about the whole world in a way,
Yeah.
because then you also try to see from other people's perspective in real life as well
Hmm.
sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, you think you do you feel like it fantasy kind of mutates the idea of what being human is, like what our definition of human is. I mean, we think of humans with just, skin and people who look like us,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
fantasy kind of takes on a different spin to it, right? I mean, you could have people who don't look like you, who may not have skin and hair and all these things, but they still have human like qualities. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
lovely.
Also, it's like if you've read most mythological stories,
Hmm.
it's most of the time in most Greek myths, it's common to like, for the idea behind the stories was that mortal beings, humans, trying to defy God or become God even.
Yeah,
So so that
absolutely.
uh, it's like through stories we are also preserving human knowledge or history or whatever,
Hmm.
and also uh, trying to go beyond what we already can achieve.
Hmm. Yeah.
S- right, because
Yeah.
I guess even inventions like aeroplanes or whatever stem from someone's fantasy, or
Hmm.
and these are like stuff that I'm quoting right off internet, but yeah.
Yeah, that's totally fine. But it's true. I mean, it's a solid point. Like everything that we imagine, I everything that we want or desire or think about, it's all just imagination. It's all just fantasy.
Yeah.
And in that sense, I feel like I there's so many amazing fantasy writers, but I feel like even someone like Shakespeare, right? He's
Mm.
written so many plays, but so many of them have this element of fantasy. Like I mean,
Yeah.
have you ever read? Do you like read Shakespeare, or are you familiar with his work?
I read about his books, but it's like when I was in school, I was in
School,
state board,
yeah.
so we had like Merchant of Venice,
Hmm.
and I think one more other work in our textbook,
Hmm.
and I mostly read the abridged versions and
Yeah,
not the
definitely.
whole version. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm
So
like, I'm kind of a, Shakespeare fan, you could say, and
yeah.
most of his work, like they're usually set in, say, like fictional islands, and they have this angel sometimes, and they have this guiding light that you can't really see, but you can hear, and there's all these
Okay.
like fantastical elements that it honestly seem kind of strange for a story that has human beings and it has kings and queens and all of these things. But it's quite interesting that you can have these elements of fantasy even in stories about humans, and you sort of don't even recognize it. People think that fantasy is just aliens and all these
Okay.
extraterrestrial things,
Yeah.
but it could be a lot of different things, right? So talk to me a
Yeah.
little bit about the fantasy books that you've read and what you like.
So the thing about India is that there are not lot of fantasy book readers
Hmm.
out there,
Yeah.
because I think first because language barrier, plus
Hmm.
it's also like a very niche genre.
Hmm.
Um, and the books that I earlier used to read was Lord of the Rings. That was, I think, the first high fantasy book that I ever read.
Hmm.
And it's set in a world like Earth,
Hmm.
um, and it's supposed to be a fictional Earth, but there's like a completely different races in there. There are dwarfs, there are elves, there are humans as well,
Hmm.
and there's this there are this evil race called orcs as well. So it's a wonderful little world which is about a journey of this character called Frodo,
Hmm.
um, and his group of there's this band of adventurers who are trying to uh, like a they're trying to destroy a ring which is
Hmm.
called the One Ring, and that journey starts from trying to take it like from one place of the world to another, and which is in like a um, which is under enemy territory. So it's a very it's like I think for everybody it's like an entry to fantasy. And
Yeah.
then after that you veer off into different fantasy genres. One
Hmm.
of the other genres I want to talk about would be, there's this book called Misborn.
Okay.
So it's a dystopian world,
Hmm.
and where there's this dictator who has taken over the whole world, and there's like a very there's a feudal like system,
Hmm.
and there's this group of thieves who want to take over the like kingdom, like overthrow him, and they have special powers. So it's like a
Ooh.
heist. It's like a heist book,
Hmm.
like but with like superpowers and stuff, and it's very interesting as well.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting, and I agree that Lord of the Rings I think was definitely is a starting point for a lot of people who are interested in fantasy. I think that's the first thing that they read most probably, and
Yeah,
I think besides Terry Pratchett, I think have you read Terry Pratchett's books?
yeah, I've heard about his books, but like I
Yeah,
haven't picked them up yet.
yeah, I guess he's like he wrote very he I think he started writing in the 30s or 40s if I'm not wrong, so he's pretty old in that sense, like that's a different generation that he was writing for. But
Yeah,
I agree that Lord of the Rings and Tolkien has just opened up this genre once again. And um, again, I feel like I read somewhere that even he sort of borrows from a lot of Shakespearean traits, and his stories also have a lot of Greek mythology, and they take from those stories as well. So it's lovely how all of these worlds sort of collide and come together. And do you read a lot of mythology as well? Is that a genre that you like?
yeah. So I would say, like when I was younger, like I used to read Ramayana and Mahabharata a lot. Like first I started out with those. Like first was the stories. My
Hmm.
grandmother actually used to tell us stories about Mahabharata and Ramayana.
Hmm, lovely.
So that's when that's how it started basically. But yeah, I've read a lot of mythology books as well,
Hmm.
and Brahmana and Mahabharata are definitely books you need to read if you need to
Yeah,
understand Indian culture, I guess, and like the
absolutely.
way our people, Indian people, and society as well in a way. So yeah,
Hmm. Yeah, it's a timeless book, honestly. You can pick it up at any age, wherever you are, and if you start reading, you understand so much about where we are right now, as a nation and as a people, and it's so potent. And I think just I've read like different versions of it, like retellings of the Mahabharata as well.
yeah, yeah,
Shashi Tharoor has done that, and there's a lot of these. I think there's some dystopian versions of Mahabharata as well. I can't remember the name, but
Okay.
there's a lot of, so many people try to play around with this one really old story. And it's very crazy how everything that was written in those stories, it still holds true. Like, how do you think that happens? It's so crazy to think that stories written so long ago can still be so relevant. Do you feel like that happens a lot with like the fantasy books that you pick up as well?
Uh, Not sure because like I would say that those mythologies have become more of religion now,
Hmm.
and that's a different topic
Yeah.
entirely. But
Yeah.
definitely, like books have a deep effect on fantasy books. Characters in general have a deep effect, right? So I guess
Hmm.
it's a very subjective thing,
Hmm. Yeah.
uh, wherein some people would get attached to a character
Hmm.
and would get into, will hold on to that thing forever in their hearts, and then there'll be like readers who just like reading a lot of books, and
Hmm.
they read for fun or different things. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a very subjective thing. Personally, I would say I like the character development parts of
Hmm.
any book, or fantasy genre or whatever.
Hmm.
So basically, um, character's journey, right, from when he's, we could say, inexperienced with how the world works,
Hmm.
to get learning through mistakes, making failures, and then training, and then getting power ups or whatever, and then leveling up to finally then defeat the boss or solve the problem. That's
Hmm.
the interesting part of the story. I even also like all the characters. So like I'll even like a evil character if he
Yeah.
was like played out beautifully. So yeah,
Hmm.
that character development aspect of the story, yeah, that's what interests me a lot more.
Mm. I think books made me realize that even evil characters or evil people are not entirely evil. Like, everybody has some sort of good in them, and everybody has some sort of reasoning for the way they behave. So that
Yeah,
level of empathy for you to connect with even characters that are not likable, I think that definitely only comes through books. I think when you stay with characters for that long, for like 300 pages or 400 pages, then you develop some sort of empathy, and it sort of mirrors your real life as well, right? Like, a lot
yeah,
of times, even people we don't like, we are if we are constantly around them, you are going to encounter more and more of their personality, and you realize that maybe they're not that bad of a human. So it kind of, yeah, books definitely help you get through life just in general.
yeah. But sometimes it happens such that we are like there's this character, whatever we say, whatever, there's this imaginary thing. You trust
Hmm.
an imaginary thing more than you would actually trust a person in real life, because
Yeah.
that's a biggest thing for a lot of people, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah. I think that's a complaint that a lot of people have about fantasy as a genre as well. That it takes you so away from the real world and the world that you're living in right now, that you can sort of just get completely lost and detach from the things around you. So I
yeah,
agree. I sort of agree with where that conversation would go. Tell me more about some of the books you've read. The books that have just like shaped your life and uh, got you to where you are and where you're gonna go.
yeah. So I think initially, um the initially I read a lot of Tinkle, and those comics were like a friend in a way, you could
Hmm.
say. Those were funny, characters that were like heartwarming and things. Uh, I used to like wait out like every month. Those used to cost I think 20 rupees back then,
Yeah.
and I used to save up. And there used to be like one magazine every month, so I used to save up and get those things.
Hmm.
After that, I started reading mystery stories when I was in like eighth or ninth.
Hmm.
Um, a lot of Enid Sherlock Holmes, Famous Five, all those books. And after that, I started with Harry Potter, Percy Jackson. Um, these are all those mainstream books
Yeah.
that people know about in this genre.
Hmm.
Um, I've read Chronicles of Narnia. I
Hmm.
tried to read Game of Thrones, but then I gave up because it was for me it was getting too dry.
Hmm.
So I stopped. And then there are these books called Wheel of Time, which
Hmm.
I half finished because
Hmm.
there are like 13 books in the series. Um,
Wow.
and then Brandon Sanderson's complete works
Hmm.
a- and a few books here and there.
Hmm.
So yeah, I've actually not read a lot of books. I think if I narrowed down, it would be to about 200 or 300 books maybe.
Hmm.
But like it's all like spread out in different genres.
Hmm.
But most of them have been fantasy. Yeah,
That's really lovely, and I can, even though you say that you've not read so many books, I can see that those books that you've read, they have had a profound impact on you. I can really sense it,
yeah,
and I think our listeners would be able to sense that as well because um, it's so lovely. I can sense that you connect with those characters, with that world, so much, and you have a sense of empathy in you already. So it's really lovely to hear. And I agree. I kind of gave up on Game of Thrones myself. Uh, I tried to read them as well, but I think I got very overwhelmed by it and very intimidated. They're
yeah,
huge books, right? Like they're really huge, and I think uh, it takes up a lot to stick with those books. And I haven't. That's why I've kind of I want to go back to it, so I haven't really watched the series because I want to finish the books. But
yeah.
I don't know if I'll be
I
able
mean,
to.
it it doesn't matter now that fandom is completely
Yeah, it's
s-
crazy.
disheartened in a way. Like
Yeah,
the
I
people who
yeah.
like the books are waiting for an end, and the ones who like the show, they just got sad with how things
Hmm.
ended. So
Were
yeah,
you a fan of the show?
I was a fan of the show as well. Like the first
Hmm.
4 seasons were really good.
Hmm.
But then yeah, even I knew the storyline because like I all my friends read books,
Hmm.
like yeah, Facebook groups, and uh, I met a lot of readers that way, and
Lovely.
all of
Yeah.
them read this book, and I basically uh, I know them and I know what they say about how it ended, and so it's not pretty, right? And like I would say, like what happened was in a way a betrayal or
Hmm.
complete irresponsibility by the production team or whatever
Hmm.
whoever was making the shows. But yeah, uh,
Yeah, I love the idea of having this book community because book reading and getting novels and getting through them, it's it is a very isolated experience, right? I mean, you don't read in groups. It's not a community experience when you talk about, like, when you compare it to movies
yeah,
and stuff. So
yeah,
it is a very isolated thing, but because of technology and because of just the power of stories, I feel so
mm,
many people get connected and so many people find um, other people who are as crazy as you said about books. So
yeah,
it's so lovely, and this is
yeah,
why I love doing this, and I love talking to you as well because it's so good to find more people like you.
Definitely.
Yeah, so lovely. And I think, that's a very perfect way to kind of wrap up this episode as well. And I think we've touched upon a lot of things. And I think one last thing that I wanted to ask you, especially regarding what you said, was about, getting to hear a lot of stories from your grandmother and your mother, which I thought was absolutely lovely. And do you feel like that storytelling gene has kind of passed on to you as well? Do you feel like you're a natural storyteller in a lot of ways?
Uh, yeah, I used to like writing a lot. Like, not really. So the thing is, it's kind of complicated for me. A lot of things is that if I like something, then I absolutely have zero inhibitions when I'm doing it. So like
Hmm.
I'll just get on and do something. And I used to like writing when I was a kid and throughout school as well. Like
Hmm.
whenever there used to be English period, I would be happy because we'd be
Yeah.
reading about books, we'd be reading about stories,
Hmm.
uh, and then we'd be doing essay writing, stuff like that.
Hmm.
But like yeah, that thing actually kind of died off after like
Hmm.
10th standard. And like
Yeah.
then the whole college thing, what
Hmm.
do you want to do next, what do you want to do for your future, never really paid any attention to that. And but like yeah, that gene probably is there in me, is there in me. And I'm trying to actually discover it myself. Like I
Yeah.
tried that throughout the past last year, and
Oh,
like
lovely.
slowly getting back to writing. And I think my job as well, like it's
Hmm.
a digital marketing thing. So basically I'll be uh, creating a lot of content,
Hmm.
uh, and that'll be towards like um, for like basically reaching out to people, connecting with them, right?
Hmm.
So I think that'll help me definitely sharpen whatever gene I might have, I would say. Or maybe if it is there, it'll bring it out. If it's not there, then it's fine as well for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I I wish you really well on your journey. And I hope that you are able to, kind of get back to writing as well. Because, again, writing, just like reading, is another completely different but, similar art form. And they kind of complement each other so
Yeah,
well. And they're both about, getting people to connect with each other. They're both about these really wonderful things about human connection, right? I love that,
yeah.
and I hope that you can go back to it and get on that journey as well. So this was a lovely conversation, and one last thing before we wrap this episode up for good. What is one thing that you would tell a new reader, someone who's just trying to pick up books? What is one thing that you would tell them?
I mean, I don't know. I've tried a lot of times to get my younger siblings to read books, maybe thinking that will help them,
Hmm.
but they've definitely not listened to me. But I don't know. I'm not sure what I would say, but the only thing I would say is that books are like a different doorway into a different world.
Hmm.
So sometimes it will also help you broaden your own perspective,
Hmm.
um, change the way you think, or change the way you see the world. So that's definitely a good thing for you, because change is the only thing which is, let's say, constant. So and we already seen through last year how rapid the changes
Yeah,
have been, and how. So yeah, I guess reading a lot more books would help you be a lot more adaptable to things around you.
absolutely.
And one more thing regarding the writing and reading thing, it's like
Hmm.
if nobody ever wrote anything, then there wouldn't be a reader as well. So yeah,
Yeah.
obviously, like the both those things complement each other, and
Hmm.
I think that's a uh, biggest I would mm, language or writing and reading. These are like the biggest inventions or the underrated inventions of human civilization.
Absolutely. I agree. And, we wouldn't be where we are if it were not for stories. And we wouldn't have turned out the way that we did without stories, right? So
Yeah,
it's a timeless thing. Everybody throughout um, forever, I mean, as long as humankind lasts, everybody's going to be telling stories. So we might as well
yeah,
read more and write more and just connect more. So it's a lovely thought to end this episode on. And I'm so glad I had you here. It was a lovely, lovely conversation, and I hope that we can have a lot more conversations like these. So if anyone
yeah.
wants to find you, how are they to find you? Like, plug in your Instagram and everything.
So, um, like my Instagram ID is the big two infinity, and yeah, thank you for inviting me. Like, it was really a surprising and nice experience for me.
Hmm.
So happy to have uh, shared my thoughts.
Yeah, it was really lovely to have you here. And to all our listeners, thank you for tuning in. And I hope that, if you like this episode, please go and read up on all the books that he had mentioned, and even find Sabrish on Instagram. And, don't send him any weird messages. Just be kind to him. And, I hope that you can have more people talk to you about books, and you build that community a lot more. So thank you so much for
Yeah.
coming here, and thank you everybody for tuning in.
Now